Hi everyone, Dave here at East Rosebud Fly and Tackle in Billings, Montana. Welcome, appreciate you joining in. Today I'm going to tie a Griffiths Gnat, which is probably the most common adult midge imitation ever tied. Let's talk a little bit about midges. We all talk about chironomids or chironomids, however you want to call them. That's just the larval stage of the adult midge. Midges are in the order Diptera, two-winged flies, which includes horseflies, deer flies, mosquitoes, houseflies, flies you've never even heard of. There are thousands and thousands of different dipterans around the world, and they probably have the widest distribution of any insect. Except for the two poles, midges occur everywhere, even in oil slicks. They also have a very quick turnaround lifestyle. Most of them every month. They mate and have a new batch of midges. So they're a prolific animal, very important for trout. And the Griffiths Gnat is a good representation of a group of midges. Now, midges in lakes can get to be a size 12. In streams, we have midges that are so small they cannot even be imitated with any hooks we have. So understand that this represents a cluster of adult midges mating. I'm going to show you how to tie a high vis. The problem is when you put this down with a mat, and I mean a mat of midges, you can't tell which fly is yours. And if you're fishing with a fly you can't see, you're not fishing it. And I'm also going to show you how to reinforce this. I'm going to call this my bomb-proof Griffiths Gnat. This is a pretty midge here. This is a size 18, and all it is Peacock with Grizzly Hackle wrapped through it. So it's nice and pretty. The problem is it's not durable. One prick of a trout's tooth, one misstep of your forceps, and the whole thing comes unwound. So I'm going to show you how to reinforce this thing so that it lasts more than one fish. I'm going to tie this on a size 16 hook, although we get these all the way down to 24s. I'd like you to be able to see a little bit of what's going on here. So this is just a standard dry fly hook, size 16. For thread, I'm using Veevus 14-0, 14-aught black, and that's just to keep the bulk down. So starting just behind the eye, we're going to wrap about halfway down the body. Now your high vis indicator can be anywhere on the hook. It makes no difference. But I like to leave enough room where I can get a couple of wraps of Peacock and Grizzly between the post and the eye. Now anytime you design a fly, it's a learning process. We wanted a hot pink post, so, excuse me folks. First of all, I selected this floral fiber. I thought this would be a good fiber. It tended to, every thread wrap, every wrap of hurl or hackle, it wanted to grab it. So it didn't turn out to be such a good choice. Instead, I ended up trying Kreelex, MFC's Kreelex. Now, if you think about Kreelex, you think about metallic. You think about all the metallic colors they offer. You think about mylar. But this UV hot pink is a strange material. It's almost a nylon type of material. It's supple, it's still very colorful, and it does not tend to grab materials. So all I'm going to do here is grab maybe a half a dozen of these strands. As you can see, I have a lifetime supply here in this one hank. And I always do this with synthetic materials that I use. I burn the end. This way the fibers are coalesced, and I can cut off sections as I go and still have the same number of fibers that I started with, and I just take it from the unburnt end. So I'm just going to take about 1.5 inches, whatever you can hold on to. We'll trim it at the last. I'm going to put this on identically the way I make posts in my parachutes. So if you've ever seen any of my videos where I tie a parachute dry fly, I'm doing this identical. Take one wrap, make sure that your material is on top of the hook. Second wrap, right on top of that. Then I'm going to twist it. I'm going to take the material over the eye, pull it towards me, the material over the tail, push it away. This allows me then to make a cross wrap in between those fibers. And with the second cross wrap, now I have executed 2 X wraps, okay? And that's all you need to hold that. Now, since I wrap counterclockwise up the post, I take 1 wrap of thread around the hook shank in front of the post. That just helps to set the thread up so that my thread wraps are as close to the bottom of the post as I can possibly get it. So it's counterclockwise looking from the top. Now you can make your post any way you like, but this post is not going to come apart. I'm going to take 3 wraps, one on top of the other. This will hold this together. And then 1 wrap, conventional clockwise around the hook to reestablish my wrapping. And then I'm going to bring the thread back to the back of the hook. Now a lot's going to happen here at the back of the hook. I want to make sure that my thread is hanging right at the end of the shank, which is at the back of the barb. All right, now if you're only going to tie a few of these, I suggest you use an eyed stick. The best hurl on a eyed stick is between the eye and about 12 inches down. These sticks can be up to 4 feet long, and as you progress down the stick, the hurl gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So I could tie this fly with just 2 of these hurls because they're so full. However, when you do this commercially, it gets to be very expensive to buy this type of material. So I want to show you an alternative, and that's strung hurl. Strung hurl is the hurl that comes from lower down on the stick. It doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean it's not usable. It just means that you have to select it and use more. I'm going to select 4 hurls with just 2 principles. One, it has to be long enough to do the job. And secondly, it has to have some hurl on it. Some of these are so skinny that they're not even worth using. I'm just going to take 4 of these. Roughly align the tips. They don't have to be exactly aligned because I'm going to cut off about 1.5 inches of the tips anyway. The tips are simply too brittle to tie. If you start to wrap these, they're going to break at the very first wrap. Clip it off, tie it down here where we have the thread hanging. All right. Now you can see I've come just slightly in front of the barb on the fly itself. Now I'm going to do something unusual. I think people always think of a dubbing loop as something to put materials in, to secure materials. I'm going to be using this for a different purpose. I'm just going to make a blank dubbing loop. Make sure the top is closed off. Advance my thread to about over the point of the hook, and for now I'm just going to move that dubbing loop out of the way. The hackle is hackle appropriately sized for this hook. So this is a size 16 Grizzly saddle. For this very small Griffiths Gnats, I'm talking 20s and smaller, you're probably going to have to use neck hackle to get that small hackle, but it works just fine. Strip off a little bit of it as you normally would. Tie it in right where my thread is. Now I like to have the concave, the shiny side facing towards the hook eye. If you look at books that were written before the 1980s, before Tom Whiting got into the act, they always stress you tied it in with the dull side facing forward. The reason for that is when you wrap the hackle tends to lean forward, supposedly giving the fly better support. The hackle we have today is so much better, you don't have to worry about it. Plus, the tie-off is much cleaner if you wrap with the hackle slightly leaning back. So the shiny side is forward. And I'm going to go ahead and bring my thread all the way up to behind the eye. A quick half hitch to get my bobbin out of the way. Right there. If you're lucky, some whip finishers actually have a half hitch on the end of the tool. Okay, now this is important. This is what makes this bomb-proof. You have your hackle, you have your dubbing loop, and you have your peacock hurl here. So I'm going to bring the hurl down, put a little tension on it, not too much. If you overdo this, you're going to break it before you ever get started. I just want enough hurl to get the job done. So for this size fly, just a few inches. I'm using this electronic clip type of hackle pliers, which this is about the only time I ever use this. Clip off the butts, they're simply in the way. Now I'm going to make one wrap around the hook shank behind my dubbing loop. Then I'm going to make one wrap between the dubbing loop and the hackle. If I have room, I'll make another wrap behind the Grizzly hackle. Excuse me, behind the hackle. Now I'll get my dubbing loop out of the way, and I'll continue to wrap this forward. Now I like to give it just a little bit of a clockwise twist. That means looking from my end towards the hook, a little bit of a clockwise twist. What that does is that kinks that hurl backwards and helps to stack it. And you want to stack this as tightly as you can. Don't over twist it. Just a kind of a half twist every wrap. Pack it close against the post and then close in front of the post. And we're going to end up right where the thread is. Okay, so far so good. Tie this off with 2 firm wraps. Now remember, this is 14-aught thread, but Veevus is so strong, you can put a lot more pressure on it than you think. All right, now we'll wrap the Grizzly hackle. I like to try to get 5 or 6 wraps. This is what floats this fly. And you'll see, because I have a wrap of peacock behind the hackle has no tendency to slide off of the back of the hook. That's why those 3 items were put in that order. So I can wrap this with confidence, knowing it's not going to go where I don't want it to. And then bring it directly in front. Now I've talked about this before, but the sign of someone who knows how to wrap hackle is what I call a vertical face, that you don't have barbs sticking out over the eye. There's really only 2 things you need to keep in mind. First of all, the thread has to be directly underneath the hackle. I take 1 wrap with thread with no tension. I bring the hackle away from me, towards me. What that does is it separates the hackle fibers away from the quill, and it allows the thread to slip right against the quill without trapping hackles. Tighten that wrap, make a couple more tight wraps over it. And when I trim this hackle, you'll see I don't have barbs hanging out over the front of the hook. Very easy way to make a pretty fly. Now I'm going to take my dubbing loop. Now I could have wrapped my peacock hurl with the thread itself, wrapped it around and wrapped them both at the same time. And that would have secured the peacock, but it would not have secured the Grizzly hackle. That needs to be secured as well. Just going to put a few twists into this to make it just a little smaller in diameter. Now, since I have 2 wraps of 14-aught thread, what I have is 7-aught thread, which is almost 6-aught, which is Veevus's heaviest thread. So you're really supporting this fly with a very heavy thread. Now I'm just going to start wrapping. You also see that this first wrap does not slide off the back of the hook. Why? Because there's a wrap of peacock behind it. Wrap this through. It will sometimes depress the fibers a little bit, but just by wiggling it back and forth like this, you can help eliminate that. So now I have the threads supporting both the hackle and the hurl. The fly may not be quite as pretty, but I guarantee you this fly is going to last. A whip finish. And then lastly, trim the post whatever length you like. I like it to be about the length of the hackle itself. You only need to see this. And when you have a mat, and I do mean a mat of adult midges on the water, this will allow you to separate your fly from the naturals. So an easy tie as long as you do a couple of things to secure it. Questions or comments, let me know. As always, thanks for joining in. We'll see you next time.